A female journalist asked famous designer Valentino, how did he create such a fashion empire? His answer was very simple. I know what women want. The skeptical journalist pressed him.
What do women want?
Yeah, I know what women want.
And what do they want?
They want to be beautiful.
Right now, you're probably asking, what in the world does this have to do with men and meat? I think the answer is people who specialize in knowing what we really want are the ones who create empires. And in the food business, they influence what we eat more than doctors and scientists do. Okay, that's a crazy bold claim. But let's see if I can convince you with two fascinating examples, and then we'll get to the incredible story of men and meat. The first example is when the Philip Morris Company bought Miller Beer, which was in 13th place among beers at the time. The Miller execs, like most beer executives, were master brewers of German descent, and they thought in terms of the taste, the texture, the water, and the hops. Surely the brewers thought if only the consumer knew we had better water, they would buy our beer.
The water. The pure, natural, artesian water found only at Tumwater. Today, there's only one Olympia brewery, at Tumwater. And Olympia is one of the most popular beers in the West. Proof that when it comes to beer, it's the water.
Does that remind you of the scientists and nutritionists who believe that if we only knew the power of greens, that would change everything? I'm not being critical of the great scientists and nutritionists, they're my heroes. I'm just saying. Philip Morris, the company that bought Miller, had to promise the Miller execs they wouldn't mess with their fine-tuned brewing process. But Philip Morris said, we know some things about men. After all, we turned an insignificant cigarette brand from the 1800s into a sensation, Marlboro. Men want to be cool and masculine like the Marlboro Man. At the time, Miller called itself the champagne of bottled beers and showed couples drinking together in a formal setting out of fancy glasses.
Enjoy life.
Enjoy life.
With Miller.
High life.
The champagne of bottled beer.
Miller's VP of marketing, whom I spoke to at length about this back in the day, quickly changed the setting to buddies drinking together in the bar with very cool retired sports heroes.
It's one of my bigger days. Let me buy a beer. Sure. These fans, I love them. When I came in, they didn't recognize me at first, but then when I told them who I was, next thing you know, they're buying me my favorite beer.
And with those ads, Miller started racing up the charts quickly, as Marlboro had done. This is where nutrition comes in, sort of anyway. The men couldn't drink as many full-calorie beers as they wanted in the bar without getting full. Passing on another round did not necessarily make you a cool kid among your buddies. So Philip Morris approached the Miller execs and asked them about diet beers, which had failed so spectacularly. And as you can imagine, the master brewers at Miller reacted with horror. Those beers tasted like pool water. Consumers had flatly rejected them. But Philip Morris made a good point. They had been marketed as diet beer to men who have a negative attitude about dieting and to women who have a negative attitude about beer. What if they called it Miller Lite and put manly men in the ads who argued about whether they chose it because it tasted great or it was less filling? The master brewers responded that they would need some millions of dollars to develop a version that didn't taste like pool water. But Philip Morris said, no, just license one of the diet beers that failed and pour it into the Miller Lite bottles, and let's do a test. How's this commercial for cool and masculine?
When you're a big guy like me, people always want to see just how strong you are. So after this arm works, this arm always relaxes with light beer from Miller. The Light's got a third less calories than the regular beer, and it tastes great. What I like about it, it's less filling. So when you're in a hot match like this, you can't afford to get filled up.
You have the time?
Yeah. About 8:30.
Yeah, thanks.
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer. And less.
Next.
It was Olympia Diet Beer, one of the great failures that they poured into those Miller Lite bottles. And light beer became one of the great beverage successes of the last century. It was the exact same diet beer that men said in focus groups was disgusting and that they would never drink it. Today, the top 4 light beers, including from Miller, represent 50% market share of all beer sales. Okay, but Chris, it's a little bit of a stretch to refer to that as nutrition. And anyway, a good friend of ours said, 2 men, half a brain, 3 men, no brain. And that applies to men drinking beer in the bar and also to other stupid male tricks, and you should know because you're Exhibit A.
2, 1.
Valid points. Okay, here's an example for you that involves moms feeding their children. Oscar Mayer had been worried about the declining sales of bologna for years. The food scientists had tried every combination of fat, sugar, and salt to prop up declining sales, but it was of no use. There was a growing tide of awareness among consumers that processed meat was bad news for health. I can summarize in one word what women said about bologna in focus groups. Ew. So Oscar Mayer brilliantly decided to think beyond fat, sugar, and salt to another key ingredient, convenience. After years of experimentation and product development, they came up with an absolutely blockbuster product that combined bologna, processed cheese, and rich crackers. Lunchables. It got bologna sales fired up again, and this from mothers who said in focus groups bologna was disgusting and they would never feed it to their kids. And from there, Oscar Mayer could expand their empire to include a candy bar and a drink. Notice the thing they put front and center to make you feel good about your purchase. Protein. The moral of the story is good marketers know more about what we want than we do, and they have billions of dollars to weave their magic. So what about men and meat? Well, somehow I get myself fascinated in history and end up reading books like this. Turns out in the 1800s, vegetarianism was surprisingly popular. Two of America's largest homegrown religions, Mormons and Seventh-day Adventists, had health codes that advised eating little to no meat. The Seventh-day Adventists had a huge vegetarian health spa that attracted presidents of the United States and celebrities like Tarzan. But in 1901, the United States elected a force of nature as president. Teddy Roosevelt was a man's man who popularized the vision of cowboys and ranchers as symbols of masculinity that marketers still use today. He said men of milk and water were soft men. Along with advances in refrigeration in the day and shipping by rail, the Rough Rider in Chief gave meat a huge boost. Yeah, we men are suckers for appeals to our masculinity, so it didn't take a marketing genius to focus on that. I know none of us want to believe that we're influenced by marketing, but good marketing really works. Okay, but that's still just marketing 101. And in the early 70s, the meat industry was facing a really big problem, which was the growing concern among scientists about the health aspects of meat, which was getting out to consumers. The National Livestock and Meat Board, as it was called, needed a big innovation like happened with Miller Lite and Lunchables. But what? A big problem was the Senate Committee on Nutrition was expanding its mission. It had only addressed undernutrition before then, but now it was going to tackle overnutrition. And one of its central recommendations was to eat less meat. The Beef Board pushed back hard, as you would expect, but there was just too much scientific consensus and they couldn't get anywhere with that. So they made a genius move that sounded harmless in the day, which is they got the committee to amend their statement on meat to read, "Choose meat that will reduce saturated fat intake." There is an old saying in marketing, if you can't beat your competitor on one playing field, change the playing field to one where you can. They changed it from talking about food to talking about food components, fat, protein, and carbohydrate, biochemistry. And that was a marketer's dream because you could say meat is way high in protein. To men, you could say protein is what builds muscle, which is what men want, and meat is where you get the most of it. To women, you could say it's the best way to satiate your hunger and therefore to slim down. One miracle nutrient that speaks to both men and women. You want to bulk up, you want to lose weight, protein will do it. And the real genius is getting consumers to think about food as biochemistry is the best way to sow confusion. That works in your favor if scientists are telling consumers to eat less of what you sell. Something about protein being made of 20 amino acids, some of them essential, cysteine, taurine, and lysine? Who can understand all that? Probably not even scientists can fully understand it. And what consumer wants to listen to a scientist talk about biochemistry? Then you can use the incredible power of marketing to bring home a very simple message, which is protein is the most important component of food, and meat is the richest source of it. Here's a masterclass on how to sow confusion while selling protein. Just lobby the government to produce a food plate like this. 4 categories of food and 1 of biochemistry. The implication is veggies, grains, and fruit don't have protein. Since protein is synonymous with meat in consumers' minds, it suggests you should have a chunk of meat on your plate for every meal. Genius! The Canadian plate, by contrast, has actual food on it. Perhaps it's coincidence that Canadians consume 40% less meat per capita, while their men live on average 4 years longer than men in the US, and their healthcare costs are roughly half of what ours are. I don't know. Here's how far we've taken our love affair with protein. The other day in Costco, I noticed protein shakes for kids. I don't know how anyone can understand this ingredient list except for the very last one that falls all the way down below salt, the veggie fruit blend that they tout so highly on the label. I did the math, and that turns out to be about 0% of calories. The various refined sugars seem to be more than half the calories. The first ingredient is cow's milk, so maybe this is a Lunchables-like attempt to revive the ailing dairy industry now that consumers are becoming aware of the health hazards of drinking milk. That is another episode. Here's the damning thing about food as biochemistry. It has led to a mind-blowing array of confusing diets from zero fat to zero carbs and an obsessive focus on biochemical components. And yet, the simple guide that the Seventh-day Adventists wrote in 1863, one simple sentence that you remember after you read it once that everyone can understand, has propelled their 20 million members to be the healthiest people in the world no matter where they live. Eat fruit, veggies, beans, whole grains, and nuts in as close to the natural state as possible, and that diet for 150 years has crushed every other diet scientists and nutritionists have been able to come up with using biochemistry. So why men and meat in particular? Well, the YouTube views are saying a lot of men are getting their nutritional advice from Joe Rogan. The Atlantic magazine did an in-depth story on why he's so successful, and the not-so-surprising conclusion is he understands men better than almost anyone. See what the Carnivore guys are doing for masculine imagery? And they're using words like shredded. Whole plants don't have a marketing budget like meat does, but if they did, I wonder what their ads would look like. Do you want the ripped body of a beast? Then bypass the middleman and get your body fuel the way these beasts do. From the source. Eating used protein from a cow who got it from a plant is like driving a used car when you could have a new one. When I was a teen and I used to caddy for Jack LaLanne, he used to tell us if it came from a cow or a pig, don't eat it. After a while, you won't miss it. And I think, yeah, right, I won't miss it. It's delicious. What are you talking about? I'll always miss it if I give it up. But studies show he was right. Our taste buds change, and after a while, it's amazing, but we don't miss it. But here's what I think is a bigger factor, and why I think the Game Changers movie had the right idea.
They showed us commercials.
Steak. That's what a man eats.
Selling that idea that real men eat meat.
Serious man food.
But you got to understand, that's marketing. That's not based on reality.
No matter how clear the science is, it has to be cool and masculine for most men to embrace it. That's the grand key to what we men want, and the meat marketers with the huge budgets know it better than anyone.
Hey, I got you guys a protein shake.
Awesome, I love protein.
I know you love protein. I love protein too.
Yeah, protein rocks.
Are you guys talking about protein? I love protein. I love protein too.
We know you love protein. Protein rocks.
Awesome. Protein rocks.
Protein.
Protein. Protein.
Protein.
Protein. Protein.
Should we tell them about these?
Absolutely not.
Now there's a tastier way to get some protein. With tender grilled chicken, corn salsa, and guacamole, Taco Bell's new Power Protein menu is packed with flavor.
Somebody get this man some protein!
Until eating plants can become more cool and masculine, beef is what's for dinner. Thank you so much for watching. We're starting to get noticed a little bit by people who would be fascinating guests on the channel, but I notice they're paying attention to how many subscribers we have. So if you want to see more guests and do the channel a favor, please like and subscribe. Thank you.